Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the first episode of Season 3 of the Rule 34 podcast. I'm your host, Jack, joined by my fellow guest,
Mr. Solis, and congratulations, Jack, on ushering in Season 3.
Thank you, sir. It's very exciting, and especially as how Dom and I talked on the podcast, it is very surreal to think we've been doing this now for now 6 years.
That's really exciting, sir, and I will attest, as I'm sure the listeners will also, your growth. I'm so excited and proud of your growth as a host and an orator.
Thank you. And that was actually something Dom and I especially talked about on the last episode for the 2-year anniversary, was just how much we've grown. And Dom made a good point of, just how well we fill dead air in now. We don't have as much. And the biggest one, too, was that we, during this entire 2-year cycle, have not once had to pause and try and think of something to talk about. We've just quickly and always effortlessly transitioned from topic to topic.
That's awesome.
But how are you, sir?
I'm all right. Happy July.
Happy July.
As we record this, we are on a Wednesday. We missed Monday's recording cadence because of the holiday. I want to hear about yours, sir. Mine was very relaxing. Tuesday, I was out down for the count to a mid-afternoon nap, and my phone died on my chest. So I just really worry that someone thinks the worst has happened to me because I no showed a Zoom call. But I appreciate, Jack, your flexibility in having me today.
All right. Very good to have you, sir. So you mentioned the holiday, of course. How was yours?
It was okay. My family doesn't want to do a lot ever. So we were at my mom's house just watching Twilight Zone episodes and eating a bunch of food.
That's nice to hear. I think mine was very similar in the sense that we didn't do much. And I don't know, I think my dad and brother might say I'm forgetting something, but I genuinely can't remember what I did Monday, if we did anything at all. I may have probably just watched, some wrestling matches that I needed to catch up on.
My nieces and my nephew, I think, went outside with sparklers or something low threat or low danger.
Yeah.
But how about your neighborhood? Was it a war zone?
It was crazy. And what was funnier was I was online like later in the night playing with friends, and you could hear it throughout their microphones as well. And it was about 4 or 5 people in the voice call. So it's you just heard it from all 5 going around. And I was waiting for it. I was timing it in a sense of seeing whose was it going to come from first, and it ended up being mine. Mine was the first firefighter going through the neighborhood.
Oh man!
I heard it and I go up. I guess I'm the first, and they were like, "What?" I go, "There goes a fire truck, presumably to put something out in my neighborhood somewhere in the area."
Well, goodness, I'm glad that we all made it out alive for another 4th of July with no major damage.
Yes, and then of course, as always, Saturday, Money in the Bank. A change of pace because of the fact that I think all the previous pay-per-views have been on Sunday, but now it's looking like all the pay-per-views for the remainder of the year for WWE side is going to be on Saturdays.
Even SummerSlam?
I believe so. I'll double check right now, but I'm pretty sure I saw someone make that claim that everything's on a Saturday. Yeah, July 30th is a Saturday.
That's wild. I thought they had just moved this pay-per-view because of the holiday. You're like, no one's going to be wanting to watch wrestling on Sunday when the next day is the 4th of July. They're probably out barbecuing on Sunday,
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I brought it up to you before we started recording. I brought up to Mr. Solis that there was a sense of special occasion surrounding this podcast or surrounding this event. And I talked about it a bit on the last episode of Season 2, but we didn't get to go much into detail because we ran out of time. But, so I believe it was on either Thursday night or Friday, one of those days, I was talking to Dom because we were planning for the final episode in season 3, and he starts talking to me about hey, I've been looking in and like looking at just like certain clips. He told me that he saw the match of the invisible match where it's two invisible competitors going against each other. He told me he saw that. And so in turn, I was like, hey, check out this match Mr. Solis told my dad and I about. I showed him the social distancing match that you had told us about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just talking to him, and then I sent him a couple of like videos about like different wrestling. So I was like, hey, you should check these out. They're like video essays are pretty long, but if you ever have the time, they're pretty good watches into like looking at different aspects of it. And then in my mind, I was like, well, you know what? If he says no, it's just a no. Let me just ask him just to see, since he's showing this interest. I said, hey, do you want to come over to my place on Saturday? They're having Money in the Bank. And in my mind, I was like, this is the perfect pay-per-view to start someone off because it's 2 ladder matches that are bound to have crazy spots. And so Don was like, yeah, sure, I'll show up. And so he showed up on Saturday and we watched along together. And it was his first viewing experience.
Wow!
And he actually wanted to come on to this show with us, but he's currently working right now, so the schedules couldn't line up. But he got to watch his first ever pay-per-view.
It's incredible to hear that. I'll tell you why, Jack. My buddies, I have 3 high school friends I still keep in touch with. 2 of them are married, and the two they have Peacock because they have kids, and they also like Law and Order and any number of those NBC Peacock streaming service offerings. And my man is watching the Money in the Bank. And it's so funny because we'll go into it. My memory will be triggered. I'll tell you some of the comments he's texting me because I welcomed him to today's episode too. I said, hey man, you want to talk to me and Jack about this? And he goes, he's got to figure out Zoom. He's not a guy who Zooms a lot.
Uh-huh.
But he says that by SummerSlam, he may want to join us because guess who's excited about the last man standing match between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns for the Uwu Championship? My buddy Joe was like, hey, that sounds great. And you're like, you know what's funny? If you haven't been inundated with this product like we have, I bet it's exciting. He hasn't seen those 2 fight 17 times. He's like, hey, all right, I'll be back.
Yeah, and so it was funny because I told my dad after the fact. I'm like, he was like, so you're going to tell Solis? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to tell Solis. And what I'm going to tell him is, what's it called? Through no other metrics can I, like, there's nothing more else that can define the success of this podcast other than the fact that I started off just explaining stuff to Dom as a way to, like, just get his reaction as a non-fan. And the fact that I was able to get him to watch a pay-per-view should show the success that I had on this podcast.
Wow.
I was like, nothing else can determine the success, no numbers, whatever. The fact that I got him to sit through a whole pay-per-view, and when I told him, oh yeah, they're having one later this month because they didn't want to book it for August, it's again on a Saturday, he was like, oh yeah, I'll be down to come for that as well.
Right on.
And so there's just like a ton of stuff now that he was just like, oh, I want to like see, or I want to hear you explain, because then after the fact, he still had a little bit more time, and me and my dad just had like so many matches we wanted to show him, but I was like, what's like a quick match that I can show him? And I ended up showing him Keith Lee versus Dominic Dijakovic at TakeOver Portland from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And my dad specifically wanted me to show him that because he was just like, show him what these 2 men of these 2 sizes were pulling off, and like the style of wrestling they were pulling off. Because before we started the match, and I did this for every match too, I was showing him the different wrestlers, and I was like, what type of style of match do you think this is going to be? And when he saw that one, he was like, oh, I think this is going to be like pure like brawling, like I explained to him the term Hossfest as people use. And he's like, yeah, I expect much of that. And he was just completely blown away at what those 2 men were doing in that match.
Hey, only because you evoked it. And before we get into this card from Saturday, I was listening to William Regal in a podcast, and he was asked about the transition that NXT has recently experienced, right? A big tonal shift in their product and in their presentation. And he sort of, really put it as eloquently as William Regal can, how and why that was not only okay, but necessary for them to do. And you know what he said I was really surprised by? He said, honestly, I think the previous iteration of NXT peaked in Portland. And I'm like, whoa, what a claim. That's actually kind of very true, right? Because you and me, we tracked that product for a while afterwards. Never was the same with the shutdown, with the no audiences, with the, like, you know, COVID people disappearing and needing to be booked around.
Yeah.
And just that claim that, like, the absolute peak of that product was Portland. And what he said was, like, you know, you got to bring these guys in with these characters. You got to just create a different system because they're not bringing in names like they were before. All them names are going, bam, to Jacksonville. And you got yourself really a pseudo NXT down there.
Yeah.
So, you know, just it was like I think a 10-minute clip. It was like Regal's, you know, response about NXT changes. And I'm like, wowzer.
Oh, man. And it's very true. I think a lot of people felt that way about TakeOver Portland. Because, like, especially because of the fact that they were supposed to have TakeOver Tampa and they just never, or they had it, but it was like a TV special rather than
a couple of nights. And
yeah.
Remember the final heartbeat, you know, like the cinematic match? Not Portland. And it was never quite the same afterwards.
But, you know, it was very exciting to still get to show Dom some of that. Because, funny enough, tying it, again, back to a certain phrase used, Dom asked me while we were watching, he was like, say, would you say that I have missed the peak of wrestling? And he was like, what, and if so, what years would you think are were its peak? And I was like, okay, well, for me, you know, because I didn't grow up in that era, but, you know, I always hear people talking about, you know, some people say the Attitude Era, but most people I know say the Ruthless Aggression was the peak because it was a balance of characters, wrestling, you know, and all that. Like, it had the mix of everything where you had the characters and gimmicks, you had good wrestling, people who were good at promos, the booking for the most part was pretty good and stuff when I was paying them. And I was like, but for me, I think my peak would probably be like, I think I gave them the years 2016 till 2019. Solely, well, I think I told them that, like, from my viewing experience, because I was like, for me, it's the peak just because it was probably where the wrestling itself was at the peak. Yeah. I know many people would say that, like, a lot of the character work or gimmicks might not have been at its peak, but I was like, the wrestling content for the most part was at its peak because you had just a ton of quality matches coming after one another. Like I was saying, how NXT a lot of the times it would be like only like a 5-match card, but like every match would be considered like a match of the night if it was on any other card, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. Oh, that's a tough question that I want to like have a bunch of Wikipedia windows open as I analyze and think through my answer. Because like, I don't know, when you think about like that long period where Cena was on top and unstoppable, you know, I don't remember a lot on the undercard that kept me going. It was just rote, Jack. A lot of this is just rote. I'm just tuning in to see if it gets better. And then before him, it was Triple H's Reign of Terror, right? And before that, it was, you know, is it Michael's Brett? No, because the undercard again was Sweaty Hot Garbage.
Yeah.
You think about like that, like window of time, and it was so short, Jack, but you had Angle and The Rock and Austin and Triple H and Big Show and Kane and Undertaker and the Dudleys and the Hardys all at their prime and all operating at the same time. And you're like beginning and middle and end. Not only is there something for everybody, but those people are the absolute best at what they do. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, and that's what like I was like trying to explain to him too, because I was like, you know, because he was like, oh, would you say like he asked about like the late 2000s and like early 2010s, and I was like, that's what many people would consider probably one of the worst periods, despite seeing like a lot of revenue made, was just because of the fact they went, you know, super kid friendly during that era. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was explaining to him also, like, it wasn't just the fact they went kid friendly and PG, it was the fact that also a lot of the decisions they made weren't necessarily the best. There wasn't the best of handling of certain situations and stuff. And I was telling him too. I was like, even though it's considered the peak, 2016 to 19 to me also still. I like I was saying, I can't really give you a peak because each time period kind of had their flaws. Especially like I was explaining to him, like the mid years of between like 16 and 19 weren't necessarily the best booking and character wise because you had so many characters being misused or not being used at all. And then I had to start explaining to him how when AEW popped up, it gave them like a second company to have these talents instead of it being in one place. And then that turned into me explaining to him all about the different promotions like Impact and New Japan and stuff. It was just such a fun watch because it was like you could tell he was genuinely interested and wanted to like know all these things that I started explaining to him.
And my buddy Joe used to watch wrestling. Like he and I used to play Raw vs. SmackDown at his house, where I'd watch him for hours create his character. You know, the guy who looked nothing like him, had abs for days and a ton of tattoos and like the weirdest hair beard combinations you could imagine. My guy always looked like me, a pudgy guy with glasses, looked like Hank Hill, you know? But as we go through the card, I've got his text open. I'm going to tell you what my man sent me, and it only added to my enjoyment of the night.
All right, so that being said, let's just get straight into it. We start off Money in the Bank, as I expected, with the women's Money in the Bank match.
Yep. Who are our participants, Jack?
We have Lacey Evans, Raquel Rodriguez, Becky Lynch, Asuka, Liv Morgan, Shotzi, and Alexa Bliss.
So my friend starts the show and asks, has Lesnar fought? He goes, I was going to ask if Lesnar's fought yet. And then I realized that we're just in our first match. And so the guy's already looking for the marquee guy. He's going to be sorely disappointed when he realizes that Lesnar, Reigns, Cody. Who else is missing from this card, Jack?
Randy
Orton, not here. So, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ladies vying for a shot at a women's championship.
And it's funny you mentioned it. I was funny explaining to Dom why the man with both world titles was not on the card and why he wasn't defending his title.
Yeah.
And then he goes, wait, so when's the last time he defended the title? I go, technically he defended it on TV, but if you're asking as far as pay-per-view, WrestleMania, he goes, oh, well, how long ago was that? I looked at the dates, April, like the beginning of April. And he goes, wait, how many shows have they had in between this? I went, like 2 or 3.
Meanwhile, New Japan is trying to rip that U.S. title off of Juice Robinson because he had appendicitis.
Oh, man. But another cool thing about it was, he got to see them make their entrances. He got to see Asuka make her entrance because he did rate her attire in one of the episodes. Because I had an episode tying into the Explaining Wrestling to him. He was ranking different wrestlers' attires. And so he got to see Asuka make her full entrance and see her full attire. He got to see everyone else. And funny enough, there's a segment that comes later that it was just so funny seeing his reaction. But and it involves one of the women in this match.
It's Alexa Bliss, isn't it?
Yeah.
We'll talk about the Alexa Bliss segment later because it comes up in my text conversation with Joe. But here we are. We've got the 7 ladies. What spots, sir, resonated with you?
I did like, continuing to play on the story of Becky, like, just being in this downward spiral ever since she lost the title. And so you see her constantly trying to get up for it. And then you just kind of see, like, the anger slowly building upon her throughout the match anytime someone stops her. Because, this is her one-way ticket back to it, in a sense. And I definitely liked a lot of her interactions with Asuka. I know we've seen them a bit, especially like on the weekly shows. But like I always love seeing them interact because funny enough, I saw someone mention this. It was like it seems like whenever Asuka goes against any of the 4 horsewomen, she basically tells them, "You better hit me for real, or don't bother hitting me at all."
Yes. I was, I was really excited about a lot of these women winning this thing. I think I was just really hoping like that somebody different would win it or somebody new. So like Alexa Bliss, bless her heart, I'm glad she's here. I hate her new song. She's done it, right? Asuka's another one. Like, I'm super into Asuka. She looks super strong. No, don't win it, Asuka.
Yeah. I felt the same where I was just like, I can see the routes they can go with certain people, but also I eliminated certain people from the start because I was just like, they mentioned Asuka and I was like, she had 2020 and because of the fact that these people typically don't, or at least when it comes to the women, they typically don't hold that briefcase longer than the day they win it. I was like, like the only difference they can make from when she won it in 2020 is that she holds it for a longer while. But I was like, we've kind of been there, done that with her winning it.
I also, what I was thinking, just fantasy booking in my head, I'm not against anybody winning it and then leaving it at home. They're like, yeah, Mr. Money, or I missed Money in the Bank. I'm going to cash it in when I'm going to cash it in. I'm obviously not going to cash it in today. I'm not carrying that thing around. Are you crazy?
Yeah. I think obviously the fan favorite going into it was Liv Morgan. Seems like I think I even told Dom she's been the favorite since like last year.
Yeah.
For like this is like her second year in a row heading into it, and she's like the fan favorite for the win.
There's one spot, Jack. I was thinking of the podcast where Raquel Rodriguez is going to pick up a ladder where Becky and Liv are splayed across either end of it, right? Like a barbell. And I just was like, oh, no, I knew before she started to lift that it wasn't going to work. She lifts, Becky's half comes up, Liv's doesn't, and it's because she's not standing in the center of the ladder. She's too far to Becky's side, and I wanted somebody in the front row to go, move over one rung, and it's going to look great. I know what you're going to do, and it's not going to look good unless you move over. I fell for her. I thought that was supposed to be her like big, spot sheet they replay forever in eye packages.
And it kind of felt like there was a ton of spots like that in this match where it was just like they were like off just a bit and it kind of messed up a lot of the flow of the match.
Yeah.
Like I forget what exactly she was trying to do, but there was like a spot where Shotzi had like one of the ladders propped up in the corner with someone there. And like anytime she kept trying to hit the move, the ladder just kept like slightly moving because they didn't have it. Like the way they were trying to like execute the move just wasn't like the best. Magnets under the ring that was moving the ladders.
Okay. The ladder, if it's not like really on all four legs, it was moving so much.
Yeah, and then of course there was that big spot where Shotzi like got Alexa on her shoulders and tried to lift her up, and then they just fell backwards into one of the ladders.
Yeah, gosh.
It's all a conspiracy, man.
A human, what do they call it? A human demolition derby.
Yeah, so it was a bit sloppy at some points. There was obviously the big spot again, going back to Becky and Asuka interacting, where Becky just jumps off that ladder straight onto Asuka, who's propped up on the bridged ladder. And that was another fun thing explaining to Dom, where I was like, when the men typically do that, the ladder gives way because, they weigh more. But the women, they have it harder because that ladder's not giving way, even with all that weight crashing onto it.
Goodness gracious. Yeah. That was another spot where you kind of saw Becky try to graze her, like, she didn't come head on. I think if she did come head on, they could have broken that ladder. But, like, she's definitely, like, still trying to protect Asuka. I think sometimes in trying to protect somebody like that in a spot like that, you end up hurting them even more.
Yeah, Dom even noticed it, too. He was like, I think she's, like, genuinely hurt in the sense of, like, she got the wind knocked out of her, because he was like, he like caught it out the corner of the camera that like someone was attending to her, and I was just yeah, that's to be expected after having someone land on you like that with no way given. But of course, the finish of the match, Becky's climbing up the ladder, Liv climbs up right after her, Becky kicks the ladder to the side, and a spot that could have gone wrong, much like some of the other spots, but Liv times it perfectly, gets her leg on the rope, uses momentum to get her ladder right side up, right next to Becky, knock her off, climb up, and win the briefcase.
Win the briefcase to almost unanimous, to basically unanimous applause and praise from fans and wrestlers alike.
Yeah, so good to see that happen. Like I said, she's been the favorite for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And to see her get this big moment, nice to see.
Agreed.
The next match is the United States Championship match. Bobby Lashley versus Theory. My enjoyment from this match was when they were making their entrance, asking Dom to guess what age Bobby Lashley was.
Oh, wow. What did he come up with?
I think he said early 30s, and he was very shocked when I told him he's actually in his mid-40s.
So in this match, my buddy Joe is texting me, and when he hears Bobby Lashley described as the Almighty, he sends me a laughing Bitmoji. And he says, when I last saw Lashley, he's a poor man's Lesnar. I said, funny you should say that, because Lesnar beat him for the WWE. I wanted to tell him, hey, this is a former WWE champion, but happened to have lost it to Lesnar in January.
Yeah, that was something, again, I had fun explaining to Dom, was like, because he obviously wanted to know more, so he was asking me a bit more about Bobby Lashley, and I was explaining to him that how later in the night he'll also see Drew McIntyre, and I was explaining to how the two of them started off as young prospects in the WWE with a lot of backstage support, in the sense of they were being billed as the new superstar for WWE, but how both kind of failed to really get over, and how they both had to leave the company, get better in order to come back and now be the men they are now for the company.
And what's so funny, Jack, is Cody Rhodes coming back in April, right? We're all fawning over it. We're still riding the high that came from that. But really, and maybe it's because he came back at WrestleMania, or maybe it's because he went and started his own company. Well, we've seen this story before. We've seen it in Bobby Lashley, and we've seen it in Drew McIntyre. These guys were doing it before it was cool.
Yeah, that's what I was explaining to Don. I was like, yeah, the two of them had to go. And I was like, Lashley's journey was a bit longer, and the fact that he had to go spend a really long time away in the company. I was like, Drew spent 3 years away. Lashley spent quite some time away. And then again, I had to explain to him, and that was mainly due to the fact that there wasn't another big company in North America like there is now where he could go showcase and then come back. It was he had to really build himself on Impact and the indies and stuff. Mm-hmm. I was like, Drew was a bit more lucky because there was more indie promotions at the time that he left, and he really got to travel throughout all of those to get it.
And Lashley did Bellator. He did that I'm an MMA fighter and lived it.
Yeah.
Went and had a successful run of wins in a actual MMA company.
Yeah. So it was real fun explaining that to him, and I think Dom was picking up on a lot of things without it having to be explained to him. The moment he saw Theory walked out with the selfie gimmick and stuff like that, he looks at me and goes, I can tell this guy's probably not liked very much by the fans. He's a natural heel, bad guy to these guys.
Bro, you know what I saw someone on Instagram say? They said, ugh, you're just WWE Sammy Guevara. And I'm like, oh no, he's Sammy Guevara.
That comparison works really well. But what'd you think of the match, sir?
Match. It was, I think I'm waiting for Theory to do something sneaky, right? Because Lashley is just so much bigger and so much more powerful. He really throws Theory around, right? I'm like, gosh, how's this gonna? How are we gonna keep the title on Theory? Because obviously we are, right?
That's how I felt too. Because I was like, Theory's the young guy. He won this title. I forget how long ago, but he's had it for a bit. But I was like, I don't know. It feels like, because in my mind, because it's all everyone keeps talking about. I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, he's facing Cena at SummerSlam, and is likely gonna still have this title. So, like the entire time, I was just thinking, what's he gonna pull out to like really get over this? And I don't know. I mean, there was a couple close moments. Like I told my dad, there was a couple close moments, but it was mainly Lashley, like all the way through, just dominating the guy.
What bust? Oh, you know what? I think Lashley goes for like the spear in the corner. I think Theory ducks it, and I think he like eats the turnbuckle. I think Bobby Lashley bit his tongue or bit his lip because he's all blood in his teeth for the rest of the match.
Yeah, oh, and that was something I forgot as well. I think Shotzi got busted open in the women's ladder match.
I think so too. So much so that I thought she was wearing red makeup, and I go, I don't think she was wearing red makeup.
Yeah, that's what Dom and I were trying to catch. Her like, was she wearing red eyeliner? What's all that like red smeared on her face? And then that's when they showed like the replay where she got thrown off the turnbuckle. I forgot about that spot until now that you mentioned the blood. She gets thrown off the turnbuckle and hits her back of the head on the ladder. But me and Dom were still kind of confused about that because like that can't be the spot, because how did the blood get all the way over to her face unless that's how busted open she was?
There aren't too many spots about this match that I can recall. It's just the finish that I'll tell you what, Jack, I felt like vindicated as like not just a wrestling fan, but somebody who ascribes to logic. I'm like, oh, my heart, it swells.
Yeah, I was very caught off guard by the winner, which ends up being Bobby Lashley as he uses the Hurt Lock on Austin Theory.
Yeah, Theory can't hit his A-Town, downtown, whatever he calls it. Lashley puts him in a Hurt Lock, and he taps right away. Why? Because Lashley's a giant beast of a man, and Theory is smaller.
Yeah.
So, like, it's like this assurance that, in my mind, I honestly thought, I can't imagine Lashley losing this match because he's so big. And he didn't. I'm like, goodness.
Yeah, and so I was very shocked because I was like, man, that's really surprising to see, him beat Theory like that. But I was like, I wonder where they go from here. And oh boy, would we see where they went.
Oh boy. How many minutes we got, Jack, left in this episode?
12 minutes.
12 minutes. Do you think that's enough time to cover the next match?
I think so. Let's try it.
Let's.
So the next match is the Raw Women's Championship match between champion Bianca Belair and challenger Carmella. Bianca, another wrestler that was on that wrestling attires tier list that I had Dom do. I mainly had her on there because I explained to him how she makes her own wrestling gears herself.
Really?
Yeah, and so he actually was surprised by that, and so he was in a sense thrilled to see like in action what her gear looks like and stuff.
Oh, cool. I'm not a fan of her bow. Like the big old and bow she wears. Otherwise, no, I'm super into it. My friend at this point is texting me going, hey, wait, is there still separate rosters and separate titles for the two shows? Because remember, I was telling you, we were playing Raw versus SmackDown way back in like 2006. And I'm like, yeah, Joe, they stopped doing it, and then they did it again. So we are talking about the Raw Women's Championship match.
Yeah, that was another thing explaining to Dom was the brand split.
There's two. The brand split is so much easier to explain because they're on different networks.
Yeah, because it was so funny explaining to Dom. I was like, oh yeah, so Roman has both the world titles, and then his cousins who are in a faction with him called the Bloodline because they're family, they hold both sets of the tag titles.
I told that to my buddy too. I said, yeah man, separate rosters. I said, except Roman Reigns has both men's titles. And he goes, I thought you said Lesnar won the title. I went, oh yeah, way back in January, but it's been a long year, man. And I just was reflecting on, it's been a long year.
Oh man. It was so funny to explain to Dom because he was just like, well, how does that really work to have like two separate world titles? And I was like, well, their logic behind it is they have too many people to have just one title. But then now they're suffering from the fact that they don't have enough people for some of these titles.
Yeah, and the real answer that like we won't ever say is they don't have two titles. They have one title, and then there's another title that'll never live up to the first title. And actually, with Reigns' help, that actually became the Universal title for quite a while, for quite a bit of the last couple of years. But for as long as there's been two titles, there's always been one title and the other title.
Yeah. Remember back in the day with tag teams, you were better is when you had the World Tag Team Championships, not just a Tag Team Championship.
Goodness gracious, Mr. Castillo. You have people winning NBA titles calling themselves world champions. And who'd you be? People in the continental United States. It's not just wrestling.
Quick correction. That was Marco.
Oh, God, Marco, you sound just like your dad. And that was such a Mr. Castillo point of view.
What were your thoughts on this match, sir?
It's one of those, I felt the same way about Theory, but I was wrong. I thought this isn't one that Bianca's going to lose, right? It was okay. Carmella always, I feel like, surprises people more than she should. She herself is a former champion, but got in a few good licks.
Yeah, she made herself look compatible and viable, and that was another thing, explaining to Dom that this match was happening because another person who was originally going to challenge got injured.
Right.
This was Dom's first experience with how would you call it? Not necessarily his first time experiencing it because he commentated the previous matches, but this is his first experience seeing Corey Graves as a biased commentator.
I'm glad he picked up on that because they're just leaning all into it, talking about how they're going to celebrate after the show with all their Chardonnay.
Yeah, and then of course the Triple H reference saying he said Triple H knows a place out here in Vegas.
That's so funny. An insider. LOL. Yeah. But I can't think of anything that sticks out to me except, I always love a good Carmella super kick.
Yeah, it was a decent enough match, but I really can't think of much note to it.
And so Bianca Belair wins with what you call it? The
KOD.
KOD, and something that somebody brought up on YouTube that didn't even cross my mind. So Carmella jumps her afterwards during her celebration, right? Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I'm kind of groaning because I kind of didn't want this to last longer than it has, right? You beat Carmella, back of the line, new challenger. But what it didn't cross my mind that this YouTuber brought up is, did you ever think for a moment, Jack, that Liv was going to come out and cash it in on Bianca?
I actually didn't.
No, and it kind of follows sort of the babyface Money in the Bank holder that somebody wouldn't capitalize on a beatdown like that. But I think they were supposed to be teasing it. I think it was Carmella getting a few more licks in because she's such a sore loser. And people in the audience were supposed to go, what? But nothing happened.
Yeah, that actually didn't cross my mind while watching. It's actually surprising because later in the night that crossed my mind. But again, I was still thinking under the guise of well, hopefully this year they hold it longer than the day that they win it, because that we've seen that happen in every case since Carmella. Carmella was the only one.
And actually, at some point, I think up to this point in the show, they interview Liv, and Liv's so excited she doesn't have any plans. I think that's silly to ask. What's next? Liv Morgan, 30 seconds after you won your match, right? But she says, and she's out of breath, and she's so excited. She goes, WrestleMania sounding real nice. And honestly, I want one of these winners to own that and say, I'm making my WrestleMania moment right now in June, calling their shot like Mr. Kennedy tried to do 15 years ago.
I can't remember if it was at this point in the night, but since there's only 5 minutes left and that's not enough to cover the next match, let's quickly talk about the Alexa Bliss segment.
You want to do it in 5 minutes?
I can do it because I just want to get this in real quick because it was so funny. So,
yeah,
they pan into the room with Alexa Bliss. and Dom sees Lily the doll, and he's just like, what is this? And so I'm having to explain to him, yeah, so this whole thing happened, and the wrestler Bray Wyatt was a part of this storyline, and then he got released before there was ever a conclusion to the storyline, and I had to explain to him why he wasn't there for the most part, obviously due to outside factors of loss and stuff like that. But I was like, yeah, there was supposed to be a story involving her and him, but he got released, and so the story never finished. And he goes, so why is she still walking around with that doll? And I go, people have wanted it gone for the longest, but it's a money maker because for some reason kids are buying it so much, the replica of the doll. And so he's just looking, and he's like, so what the heck is the point of all this segment? Because he's seeing her talking about all this stuff. And then he sees her pull out the WWE credit card, and he just goes, oh, you gotta be kidding me. There's no way you're using he's like, there's no way you're using your pay-per-view time to promote a credit card. And I go, oh, if only you knew the advertisements they'll do on this show. I told him about how they had a battle royale where the sole focus was Pizza Hut being the sponsor.
No, Jack, no. This was artistry, this was comedy, and the punchline of the segment was that the doll bought her skates that would never fit her because they were doll-sized. Comedy gold! Ugh. Jack, how much time we got?
3 minutes.
Here we go. So my buddy was texting me throughout the night. When this segment came on, I wanted to beat him to the punch. I wanted him to be mid-text when I text him this. I said, yeah, Joe, she talks to a doll. It's a long story. But he isn't watching anymore. He walks away from his TV, and so he doesn't even know what I'm talking about. But I thought, oh, if he's having questions about Lashley, he doesn't know what the heck is happening here.
Oh, man, yeah. It was just so funny because Dom, like, I wish you could have seen it. Dom was sitting there, like, just, like, kind of listening. He was like, and, like, again, he verbally goes, so what's the point of all this? And then the moment he sees that credit card, it's just the funniest reaction. My dad was there for it. Dom just goes, like, to give a visual to the listening audience. He just threw up his hands and slapped him down. He's like, what was the point of all this? Why are you advertising a credit card during your show?
Incredible. That's so funny.
Oh, man. But with that being said, we'll close out in this episode. Tune into the next episode where we're going to cover the tag team match between the Usos and the Street Profits. The SmackDown Women's Championship match and the Men's Money in the Bank Championship, or Money in the Bank match.
Leaping Lizards, there's a lot to cover.
Tune in to the next episode.